Hello, I'm gonna try and doing this as directly as possible towards good and making it um, making a point about something constructive. But it would be very hard because I'm trying to tackle an elephant in a room, which is my father, and um, well, I just wanted to be said that um, well, I relate with people who had issues with abuse with in their when they're young or growing up, and the trauma makes it hard to speak about it, especially to others that you don't know how they're gonna receive that information. And I think it's still in society kind of hard to talk about abuse, especially in a hierarchy kind of um, family directed traditional society. Um, Not that I mean, some societies are different than others, and maybe I haven't known every society in the planet or the history of societies from like the existence of the fact, but um, well, pretty much every dark aspect about my body and the way I feel about my body being alone, and the way I feel my body with other people, and especially relationships, is pretty much the way I see myself kind of sucked into a por- portal of time that, well, basically, a lot of it was like emotional and mentally controlling. Some of it was like physically controlling, like, but it's still something quite dark for me to talk about. And um, I don't know, maybe female looking men have dealt with the same problem more in the past than today. I still kind of see it in every place I've been. Like, I mean, some of it is just exterior kind of impulses that come from other people, but when I see a female looking man, I kind of, stare into his eyes and kind of like, oh, I stop and be like, ah, you've been through this to the struggle of being born this way, like it's not directed to all slightly female looking man, but most female looking men go through the abuse with their family, or even being bullied and such. And it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a bit like the attitude that you inspire in people is like revolting and transforming, but at the same time it's like I don't understand why so many impulses of violence was towards me growing up in my family. And let's just imagine like a person uh, that every behavior towards his family is aggressive and toxic masculinity. And imagine that this has been subjected to someone for the majority of their young life, and because of that, a lot of things have happened. Now, I'm not gonna say I'm like absolutely perfect. I'm pretty much revolting towards most normative parents, and if they were around me, they just feel physically sick. The first time I mean, the first stare they have at me, it's kind of like provoking someone to throw up. But like, you know what? Like, I'm not trying to be comparative, and you know, I want people to see this and not trying to compare me with them or their abuse. But if there's abuse, yes, you can actually compare to me. But like the financial and social situation shouldn't be compared, because I think like rich families sometimes ignore the fact that, you know, they put their children through a lot of abuse, and because they have a system of like keeping it a secret and keeping everything against the victim. And they have so because they're Catholics, and in my father's side, it's just a very Catholic. They're Catholics and they're Christian Catholics. I don't even know, because my mother wasn't exactly Catholic. She was like, she had a Jew father, but like she just didn't took us to any like strange Catholic things that maybe in my mother's side, there was more sort of the normal thing to take their children to like Catholic education and like know about Jesus and Christ and all that. But my mother was not really. I mean, she was a bit like in doubt at the beginning, but I think she was very manipulated by the emotional and mentally controlling situation that she was into because of me and maybe my brother as well. But what happens is my brother just kept himself to himself at a point, because there was too much violence in the house, too much abuse, and well, my father wasn't constantly at home, so he couldn't really keep up the violence at a peak, but he really tested the nerves of the people he could test the nerves to, which is vulnerable children of his own and his wife. Everyone other than that, he could just, you know, respect them and speak with this aura of like, you know, how to respect another human being, how to speak to someone with respect, with a hierarchy of me being an absolute dirtbag and the other person being, you know, super important to him. And, you know, he made all clear to everyone, you know, when I was around, you know, that he was gonna be respecting everyone, and he's taking me to see his job, to, you know, all my life I pretty much have been, you know, in trips with him everywhere, with, you know, everything happening with other people. And he worked in a mountain guiding place, and before he used to work with taking people on trips or on mountains and being the guy. And you know what, like maybe his job, what he was doing went went to shit, and you know what I mean. Like it's very hard to deal with the fact that financially and otherwise, you're supposed to be the man. You're supposed to be the man of the family. When that fails, it's like he had to like rely on other job opportunities and other things, you know, and it was complex. So, and also my mom was a school teacher to kids, and so she didn't have much time for us because she was always busy. And my father was a bit like never there really. He was always on trips to, you know, either he was actually being paid properly at the beginning because he had a company, but then he wasn't very successful. He was just like sort of like drop out and the black sheep of the family, but not in a way that I am the black sheep. He is the black sheep, the false kind of black sheep. Like he's not actually struggling. He has everything set out in life. You know, you're able to get a loan to get a house. You're able to do all these things because you had children, and you could keep your job for a bit, or at least you wouldn't be so looked at because your wife has a job in the school. And you know, when I look at that, that is a normal way to look at families. But in this sense, I think he just had from very early a disregard for their own flesh and blood, and sort of more fascination by everyone else in his life. And that kind of brings me to a depression since I was very young, where I didn't have a place to be myself, and I had to keep it kind of hidden, even though, you know, it was just some, you know, misunderstanding in the beginning. It started to become violent, and he started, you know, when I started going on my own 2 feet and not having him as a mascot of like parenthood, things became very dark and isolating. And you know, I'm being there for like 20 years, being around someone who every presence in my life has been aggressive, spitting hard shit while you eat, while, you know, like aggressive stuff while you eat, while you try and run to the kitchen to get something and run back, because he made sometimes like I didn't we didn't have much bad food because my mom is obsessed with healthy food and all that. So I think it was just a combo of like my father not knowing how to deal with their own people, with people that he has by himself, you know, like and everyone else is just like, oh, you know what I mean, great, you're here. It's like, oh, I'm so ashamed of my family, but since you're here, you know, he brights up, he has a light in his eyes, and it was just like, wow, you know what I mean. But I think that's all connected with the fact that he hates himself very much, and a lot of people that cause harm to people end up hating themselves, and the fact that he doesn't realize that the hate that he projected towards their own flesh and bone was actually towards himself. And like basically converted everyone in my family, which were the only people who remotely knew what was going on, because it's still under closed doors. It's very clear because no one of our family wanted to come to see that, and so we didn't have much people coming into our house because they didn't want to see whatever was going on there. We never kind of had, because he did that in front of people as well. He just, stood there, treated everybody with respect, and then look at us like, and then just started, I don't know. He just looked at us very differently than other people. And the fact that, everyone in our family kind of like just protected the information from ever coming out makes me kind of impossible to turn that against them, because then turn that against myself, against the victim of it. It's not that I'm smiling about it, it's just that I think it's so twisted that I kind of find it hard and twisted myself to talk about it in like serious terms in my life, because like I haven't actually tackled, when I talk about my demons, my songs or whatever, the heartfelt emotions have just been like a way to express what's going on in my body, because I do think like the abuse and this violent man being present for like 20 years is a lot of years to have an aggressive father being sort of in control. And like, being control, I mean like he would at first he would just beat me up, when I was a kid, because I think my body is like not very easy to have, even if you beat me up, a black eye would come off in less than a week. You know what I mean? Like, strangling me wouldn't give any marks or stretches in the skin. I'm like made of rubber. So when like this violent man, and also my brother was like constantly being aggressive, and my mom being aggressive, verbally. My mom did kind of hit me a bit once when I tried to leave the house, because they were trying to keep me imprisoned many times. But like that was kind of, I had only one escape, like sometimes, which is like jump through the window to the first floor, which was like at the time was so little. I just like didn't want to jump through that. But like I never wanted to jump through that, because it would just break my legs. It won't even end my misery. And then the fact that you have to be stuck with them for the rest of your life because of the system of the country, how the system works in that country, and probably like many other, where the man of the family basically decides everything, and it's not just the man of the family deciding everything for you. It's just causing havoc and making your life a mistake by almost possessing you, like making every successful thing that you did a like thing to be upset and hate you for. It's something like, it's almost like using every influence and bit of your whole body into hating the victim and influencing people into making me a a, a, a lunatic, making me seen as a social pariah, basically. So my father didn't actually. I mean, he has so much influence by that when I was living there, because like the fact that he would just be full of shit every time he would talk about me to my grandmother or some other person. It would just sound like I'm ill or something, and it's like, I don't know, some of the things that happened was just like, I'm not afraid to take that step and become whatever you want me to become, as seen badly by everyone that you have influence over, which is probably how I'm looked in the world. You know what I mean? Like, how, would you take someone like me as like a victim, or would you take this very hardworking man of a family word that this person is absolutely insane, out of their mind, it shouldn't be like even close to them, you know what I mean? But like the fact that he detested his own, and he projected that, but in a sense of like making everyone sure that he's the one with the truth because he had influence. He has influenced you, and now he speaks the truth, and now you know what I mean. I think the most horrifying fact about myself is that I had to travel to another country, but that wasn't the worst that happened to me, or even being domestically abused, where I was living by myself, like the first year that I came to England, or the second, by this boyfriend I had, like this would happen, like with like just everything in the room being slammed and punched against my face, and still not even like a week after, like all my black eye was gone, all my face was fine. It's just like, it's plastic. I don't know, I barely cut myself, you know what I mean? It's just like everything in that room was like literally smashed against me. Plates, fucking TV, like there was blood everywhere, you know what I mean? But that was just something that happened under my own eye, where I was just like, oh, okay, I don't have to live like this for the rest of my life. I could just get out of here and not see this person. You know what I mean? Maybe at the time I still was in love with him, some like strange affection for someone who was beating me up. But at the same time I was like, I have a choice. I don't have to live like this. But the fact that, I mean, that man, my father, in my life, has actually taken any joy out of my body until today. I the fact that he had control over his victims, and everyone is a victim, because not just the people that he treats like that under closed doors, but the dialogue that he has with everyone else, it's towards like good, and it's towards a good thing, right? But at the same time, it's just psychopathic because it's manic because it's like trying to over exaggerate something that is absolutely mundane, like a day-to-day job or a conversation with a work colleague, or you know what I mean. I can't really I can't really juice like a normal job kind of like interaction that much, but his job is a bit alternative. He's not really just working in a supermarket, but like every person they spoke to, it had juice it so much that I just, you just think there's something wrong with this man, but like it's inside the family, not outside, because it's like he doesn't actually have any damage towards anyone else, but he's on his own. And I was just like, okay, most of my life was kept a bit quiet because of this guy, this man, who fucked someone in order to get me, which I didn't ask to be born, and I still feel like my body has a lot of dark baggage from like how violent he was and how emotionally traumatizing he was, because it was just like, I knew he was off for a couple weeks, and or even if he was faking, if he was trying to get away from his problems, he was always in the back of my head. And I work with myself in order to make whatever life I want for myself starting now. But I still feel like most of the relationship and interactions I have with other people has been quite damaged by this man, who was every presence he had in my life was from the point where I didn't thought he was a father mascot. He was aggressive in everything, and unless he couldn't be in front of someone, then he's trying to influence me towards being the bad person there, because he used every influence he could towards making every victim he had look bad. Like, I'm glad he can't just start families like Kinder eggs, because it's like making a mistake with this person, like definitely making a mistake, and a violent mistake, because it was just like, at first, like I said, it was violence, just beating up, just coming from work, trips around the world, very tiring, very physically demanding, but coming home and just project verbal abuse, like just go to my room, start like projecting this aggressivity, like, oh, I've been doing that and that and that, and then he would talk about this problem with his wife, but everything would be worse after it. It wouldn't even, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be towards him tolerating me more. It would just be like him being the man on fire and just breaking through the door and like being like a soldier of some sort, and just verbally aggressive and mentally torturing. And every presence that he had in my life, it was always like that. And it didn't matter if he beat me up, I would be glad if he did. Most of the time it was just mentally, because he's your father, he has to be there, you know what I mean? And then you talk about this to family, because you just damage your social life completely, so you can't even go through that when you're a kid, and talk to your friends about it. And like one time I made a video, and it's still in Portuguese, and some people just didn't believe I was speaking the truth. because he actually covered all his tracks. And now, when I actually even try speaking to anyone about this, it's just completely my fantasy inside the family. This is just my fantasy. I'm going through the fantasy again. You didn't got any better. You know what I mean? Everything that I speak of, it's just like turned around completely because of the way he sort of twisted the truth. It's just so blunt that I even feel something is wrong with my grandmother, with people I confront them about him, my mother especially, but I don't even attempt to do that anymore. Because it just goes back to like blaming the victim. It's the victim shaming at plain 2022, like, you know what I mean? Like, what day and age are we living at? Like, doesn't matter, you know what I mean? To this situation, it's like buried deep. Like, it's just a lot of victims that like had most of the abuse done to towards them for such a young way and such a persistent way. It's buried in your body. It's never gonna leave. It's like, if you go deeper than 1 centimeter over your fucking skin, if you could see it, it would be there. You know what I mean? But the fact that, you know what I mean, he wouldn't be constantly there. He would be like traveling a lot, coming back and doing it again, traveling a lot, coming back and beating me up. Or when I went to the police station, the first time was just like really young, like 15 or whatever. The cops believed me, but he didn't went to jail because like they thought I had a good family. I didn't have a good family. This is the lie. The fact that they didn't actually like nothing of mine that is any good came from my parents. Like, they were just a pile of hate and fixation over the fact that I'm actually succeeding on what I was doing. But the fact they would see me like have an independence away from them, and especially when I was living away from them to study, the first side of the argument they just took like the side of like the police bringing me in, like, and I wasn't charged with any crime. I was just being a bit psychotic or whatever. But you can't just take the side of the police on this matter. You have to take the side of the 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 child that you have and you abuse most of your life. So it's like, then it's just like you're never gonna change. You're never gonna understand your mistakes because you don't have anything to talk about. You don't have anything to contribute to that child's life. You just show up when they had a hard time. When you have a hard time psychologically, you need your family, you need your father, you need your mother to guide you back to normal. But what my parents do, it just drive everything to the most traumatic episode of your life. And that was just destroying my college degree, destroying my even everything. Was like, I was putting a lot of work into being a student there. It wasn't just like, oh, suddenly you just decide, oh, you're gonna end up a drug addict for pharmaceutical pills. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really think that I willingly would take that one, because I wouldn't even like to see a doctor. I'm scaring you away from doctors, you know what I mean? But in that sense, it was just like, and I wish that this conversation wouldn't have to happen to anyone in my life or anyone that I meet, because I feel like whenever I open up about my father abusing me, I'm obviously sending the wrong signals, and and I don't want to traumatize anyone with how I feel inside my body and with my abuser and the people who protected him and took his side because they were influenced by him, or my side because I'm the victim, and I was victim blamed and victim shamed all my life. But the fact that I just don't want them to take any side. I don't want to have that conversation. I just know that my father, beat me up while he could. He, he, when he couldn't, when he had to stop, was when I called the police. I was 15. How does a 15-year-old kid being mentally traumatized for so long by this aggressive man decides to just do something about it? That was the biggest fucking thing I've ever done. And it was just like, whoa, he can't do this to me anymore. Because he will have to suffer consequences. And it's so rare for this guy, this man, to suffer any consequences. That I was just like, oh, things have turned around. You know what I mean? I finally did something about it. And the first thing my brother says to me, you shouldn't have done it. And I was like, have you been the one being beaten up? No. If you were, follow your advice. That's what I told him. Because he has to listen to it. But he doesn't have to feel it. Because he was hiding in his room and being all like put down and like this all the time. Like, don't get me wrong, but I want a computer. If I talk anything about a computer, I'll get suffocated in the floor and threatened to be filmed and all that shit by my father while my mum watches and then denies everything. And then it's just like, oh, because I don't have wound marks and I don't have stretch marks in my throat or whatever. He can get away with it. And he went to the police and nothing ended up like in anything because like he just got away with it. It's just like he suffocated me in the floor for asking a computer. And he started using arguments like, oh, you don't do enough in your life. And then he's like hating himself. So it's like, but he doesn't understand he's hating himself by talking to me like I'm a dog. But he always treated like I was a dog. That's why I still feel like I'm a dog to people. I don't really feel like I'm a human being with respect. That's why I sometimes just isolate myself. I don't like my own as well. And that's pretty much a possession of my father. And my whole family is still in my brain, empowering it. Empowering the abuse of this aggressive person who is portrayed as the godly man of everyone. And like, I just don't know how to actually get out with the truth, because it's like everyone I speak to, it didn't change the way I feel about my body, because I still feel like quite dark and quite heavy stuff that was like up to 20s, and then now I'm 23, 24, so I'm 24 and I'm turning 25 in a month, in 2 months, 3 months. And now, okay, now maybe has been 4 years, but the construction of somebody, it's quite important to make who you are. So you can't just stop the abuse for like 3 or 4 years and be like a brand new human being. It's gonna stay there. It's gonna stay there, and that's what I know. That's what I felt like forever. And still, I do feel like he's taken me as an hostage. Like, After I came out of college, I was forced into a mental hospital. I was put down in a bed and taken a surgery, injection, an antipsychotic injection. I to be mobilized, but you feel everything in flames. You go through absolute hell, and because you're afraid, you 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 can't move very well. So that's the technique to mobilize mental health patients into a mental hospital where they can't get out, and stay there for a month while my hopes and dreams are down the toilet. I can't have an independence anymore because I was seen as depending on my parents, and that's why I was admitted in hospital without a proper cause, because my parents said so. So it's like they're the ones paying for me to stay there. My grandmother was the one financing it, and well, it was pretty much batshit crazy. They put me under the X machine to see my brain and take pictures of my brain. They didn't find anything, um, based on nothing, based on no criminal record, nothing, just a bit exterior that I had. I also dropped one. I was living on my own in this flat with two other people who signed the contract together, and they were listening to me smash the computer, and like got paranoid about it or something, and it saw me like screaming into a mirror and then throwing the mirror out of my window, but I knew that was gonna fall on the floor where this stands and breaks and doesn't hurt anyone, although they made all possible accusations about those events, those things. And then I spoke to them about with my psychiatrist recently, and because I knew what I was doing, it couldn't possibly be autism. It could be schizophrenia in my diagnosis, but I've read through it, and I think I might have a level of schizophrenia, but it's just a flux of thought. It's like majority of schizophrenians don't actually act on impulses like murdering or committing a crime. They just have a different process of information, and they think a lot of things at once, and they go through mental processes and neuron connectivities that most people wouldn't go and have that kind of thought processes. And then I think, oh, maybe it was because of that they thought I was crazy, but the fact was they weren't trying to help me. If they were trying to help me, they would give me what a person going to a hysterical moment would need, which is just some comfort from their parents, because they don't, you know what I mean? They don't have compassion for their own. They don't want their own. They just want it. They just like all the time. Like in growing up, it was just like abuse, aggressivity. My mum would send me to a shrink, and then it's just like would all be on me and my mom, because my mom put me on music school, or I have done something I wasn't seen as the same as this man who is hating himself, and it's just like something that isn't gonna add up. Nothing adds up. In my life, it was just, I think the impact that these people had on me was more damaging than anything outside of my body or anyone else. I understand the problem inside of myself, but I wouldn't actually have a perception of anything rather than what's going through my own body, my own flesh, because it's so problematic as it is. I wouldn't have space for any exterior interaction in my life. I would just be focusing on, how the fuck can I have a decent life with such an aggressive father? Maybe if I had a mother alone, if I could have my mom alone and have like a conversation. But if my father would come around, it would just stop the conversation, or he would start being very ridiculously still, or he would just like be like that, or when somebody says something which is like remotely sensitive to the situation, and it's like he would just be a dictator in my own life, which is something that just a psychotic parent can do. And I don't know, I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about this because I mean, all the time I've been with my father has been traumatizing, mental control, and victim shaming, and keeping his influence on the community and the people around him as positive towards him as possible, as he's doing the right thing. Like when he sent me to the hospital, it's like, oh, he's doing the right thing. No, he's just doing for his own interests. He wasn't trying to help me. If he wanted to try to help me, he would try talking to me, which he didn't. He would try to make me less hysterical, which he didn't. He just provoked me to become more hysterical, which is, oh, we're gonna go send you right away to the mental hospital, actual public mental hospital, that you actually have the power to incarcerate your own child because you can pay it. Isn't that saying something? Like, oh my god, how can you take this person from their own achievement in their life, of them doing their own study, in their own college, getting a degree, and getting out fine, untouched? I've lived my life normally. No. It would just go like, we're going to make this decision next day, after the police came there and just put you with a slap on your wrist and like, you're fine. Next day, my father, working against me, drives all the way to my home, puts me in his car, drives me back home, and tells me I'm going to a mental hospital, and there's no way to discuss this. I think in that, taking into account that I won't have my university degree anymore, I won't have my friends, I won't have the house that we rented, and this is just a projection of hate towards himself. And the fact that he can do whatever he likes to his harm people, because he can treat them like dogs, but everyone else would be, everyone else would serve as covering his own tracks in order to get as much pain as from his victims as possible, which would be violent, treat you like a dog most of the time. Yeah, pretty much. No way he would be normal unless there's a social gathering of some importance with people of the family or someone else, and he would have to respect them, so he wouldn't do that in front of them. And even in front of them, he would, try, but it would be a bit impossible, to be honest. But yeah, that's the psychotic father that I had, and I don't want to talk about this to anyone because it's still quite fresh inside my skin. I can still feel the hurt, the emotional, mental hurt that my family and no one did anything to change this, regardless of my begs for help. And it's still today something that, if I talk about it, it would just be, you're still living in the illusion, you're still living in this lie, you're still doing this and that, and it's just supporting the aggressor. and just ignoring every red flag they had with me, crying in front of them after being beaten up, or any red flag in all of it, it just gone. Like, I don't know if it's the system that I had in my family built for this man, or the fact that maybe they just wanted to contribute to this victim abuse and victim shame, because maybe they were like a victim in their life as well and they hate themselves as well. But like, I'm not making a big deal out of it. It was a constant mental trauma, and not just for one day or two. Every time my father was around, it would happen. It won't be able to like go off one day. It's just any authentic thought you had to say, anything, it would just start a fight, start being aggressive, start causing harm to everyone, and just being like, you know what? The neighbors upstairs where we were living, they had another complaint, but it wasn't even when I was living there. I've 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 immigrated, but they did a complaint. I don't exactly know where they went, but they moved out. They had to move out. And I think my mum said it was because of me, what I'd done again, defending the aggressor, which I don't know what happened in court, but they had a very accurate description of what went down there, and like, this man should be all over that fucking paper, because he was the one doing everything, and nobody understands what I've been through. And maybe the slightest thing that happened to do with this man, it's a joy to me. But like, I don't want to know about it. I just want to forget it. But my body has been so traumatized that I can't have a simple interaction with someone without, maybe giving the bad signs. Maybe giving the signs that I want to be abused or traumatized or treated without dignity and respect. And that's all has to do with the influence that my father had on me for years. I couldn't live my life. I couldn't definitely ever had a worse life while I was in Portugal. All my life was taken away from me. I couldn't deal with one day without having this man as a priority in my life. One time, while I was doped out, when I got out of the loony bin, I was dosed even worse than when I was there. I was doped out, taking risperidone and lorazepam by the spoon every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they had a youth group that I participated in our fields, because my mum bought a field, and we had a caravan and a shed. And well, at that time, I was absolutely dozing off at every possible second of the day. But I still managed to just act as a zombie into that youth. Like, they didn't even have a clue who I was anymore. Oh, I didn't have a clue who they were. I didn't have a clue who anyone was. Because I was dozed off. Like, I just wanted to sleep. And to be honest, like, I think it's quite dramatic what they did to me. I think, like, they just put me in the hospital and paid him off. Said one of the doctors was one of my distant family. She looked at me, staring at a wall. She didn't even say a word to me. She just went straight to the office. Next couple of minutes, I was asked in and was said, "You were put into this place and you're never gonna leave." And I was just like, I started running and when I was caught by these two muscular men, put down in a bed and injected, that was the worst time in my life when it was like that, because like everything turned into flames. Like I couldn't move. Oh well, I asked for to go into the bathroom. It was everything was on in flames. The water was boiling, even though it was a normal toilet in the hospital. I had to go another and into another toilet, and then the other toilet was even worse. It was just like super, super, I don't know, cold or whatever. I think it was normal water actually then, but I had to go to the second one because the first one was boiling. Everything in my head was like in flames. I couldn't move properly. I was just like in absolute fear of, a threat, an animal eating me alive. It's like so, and they use that just to mobilize you, put you in a mental hospice, and it's like, yeah, you had to go through that with like 24 hours, almost like 20 hours or something, without drinking. I started drinking out of the toilet with a woman screaming and shouting next door, and like the screaming fear of becoming a mental patient for the rest of your life, like that. But I think I swing the argument around. I just obeyed. I just gave in completely. I swinged my grandmother around, and that's why I got out. If I didn't swing the argument around, if I didn't had given, I would have still lived in a mental hospital without no one giving a damn or any clue of why did you ended up living your life in a mental hospital. This is so traumatizing to me that I can't even keep that. I can't even keep a rational argument or a rational conversation. It just doesn't. It doesn't come to me natural because it's not natural. It's just absolute devastating. I don't know when any of these people in my family ever helped me, besides just contributing to my misery in any shape, influence, and form they could possibly have on me. But in some way, they did help me. In a weird way, they helped me with resources, with way to find resources and information, and well, that got me somewhere in my life where I don't have to be afraid of my ceiling becoming a mental hospital and walls being in flames.